2022, 2023, nobody was talking about agents. Last year, I predicted 2025 is going to be the year of agents.
95% of AI POCs, in enterprise die because of either poor scoping or severe limitations that come up. How do you manage that complexity?
We have three dimensions that are important from our point of view. One is the deployment scopes, the action scope, and then critically important, the level of agency. Is the agent able to take action autonomously? Or do you want a human in the loop? AI is not going to replace you, but another human using AI might.
Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning into another episode of The Chief AI Officer. Today, I'm excited to bring you Markus Nispel, who is the CTO EMEA and head of AI engineering at Extreme Networks. Markus, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Really looking forward to it as well. Can you give our listeners and viewers just a bit of background on yourself and Extreme Networks for context?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as my title suggests, I have a couple of roles. Really, I started the office of the CTO at Extreme a couple of years ago. We were focused and are focused on identifying inflection points in market, society, technology that have an impact. And usually there's an opportunity and a risk for Extreme, and we are trying to respond to them in various forms. Yeah, whether it's acquisition recommendations, partnership recommendations, or incubation projects, which is always a lot of fun, prototyping new technologies and trying to address those inflection points. Extreme itself, we are a network infrastructure provider that focuses on mid to large size enterprises, wired, wireless, SD-WAN, the entire infrastructure end-to-end, cloud managed. And then that's where AI comes into play, because AI and cloud come really together and allow us to drive new business outcomes for our customers in a way on how they manage and operate their network and security infrastructure.
Yeah, and I'm excited to dig into some of the things that you're doing in terms of AI and cloud and kind of agentic AI and orchestration across all of these things. To get started, though, you mentioned it's a networking infrastructure company. What led that shift that you're seeing at Extreme right now in terms of starting to build more AI native? What got you interested? How has your vision evolved in this space over the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. We were starting with AI and machine learning as early as 2018, 2019. Where we focused on a couple of narrow use cases around AI ops that we brought solutions to market by 2020. We called that capability Copilot back then, very visionary because everybody has that Copilot today. But we also saw that those use cases that we are addressing with the technology were relatively narrow, and our customers wanted more. They really wanted to change the way on how network and security infrastructure for that matter is managed and operated. And at the same time, and how to become more agile in that context. And at the same time, we started within the office of the CTO experimenting with Gen AI technologies. That was early 2022. And we saw the potential of the technology. And we were envisioning, hey, how can we bring those technologies together? And also, what needs to happen on the cloud and infrastructure side to make that happen. So we decided to build a new platform one that got released recently in July of this year, with a focus of how can we build the best platform to run AI on top of it and make our customers' life easier, make it simpler, reduce proliferation of different applications that they had in the cloud, bring it all together, but more importantly, bring the data together into one place so AI can effectively act on it. So that resulted in a real substantial simplification of our customer experience on how they manage the infrastructure, but it also gave us the basis to build AI on top of it, which we have done successfully and launched successfully.
I think networking infrastructure is something that we expect a lot of reliability. I'm sure your customers demand reliability in many of those areas, and somewhere where machine learning has had a place for a long time. Obviously, generative is a different beast inside of that. And you're talking about building a platform to kind of consolidate where the data lives. I'm assuming where like the infrastructure lives, how you deploy applications. But as you started to make that transition to bring in generative into networking, what were some of the challenges that you faced? Because I'm sure there were many.
Oh yeah, there were absolutely many, and as you noted already, generative is non-deterministic in nature from a technology point of view, and on the networking side, it's all about determinism. It's all about structured data, and Gen AI is all about unstructured data. How do you bring those tools and technologies together? And ultimately, as Gen AI evolved, we were going on to that journey with the industry as well. Initially, we were focused on use cases that were not traditionally network operation related. So it was all about enablement, know-how acquisition, knowledge acquisition to make it faster, more efficient, to have access to documentation and enterprise knowledge around networking. So reducing time to value and time to knowledge, so to speak, for our customers. And that was really the starting point, or it wasn't really related to structured data or operational data. And then we thought about, hey, how can we bring those capabilities together? And this is how also the industry involved. LLMs by themselves are not enough. You need to attach tools to it, tools to leverage data coming from APIs. And this is what we have done already as well. So we went from a traditional, really content and knowledge-centric solution into a solution where you can also interact with your operational data and you enhance the capability of that system. Yeah? And then we went on to the journey that all of the industry went on, which is, again, this is also not sufficient. So what's next? You don't have just a single LLM and a set of tools to integrate your structured data. Those tools can be API access, it can be also ML models, but then you need multiple more purpose-built systems, which now are called agents that collaborate and integrate with each other in a multi-agent system. And that's where you get to a point where you can really mimic and accelerate network operations, but not only network operations. You can go from planning, design, onboarding, deployment, operations, and optimization for networking, for security, and for everything else that is required to run the infrastructure. So that was a natural path. It wasn't obvious when we started with it. So 2022, 2023, nobody was talking about agents. Last year, I predicted 2025 is going to be the year of agents, and it turned out to be the year of agents. No surprise here. So let's see what then 2026 is going to bring to us.
Yeah, I think you dug right into the heart of the matter in terms of what it means to drive value within an organization using these technologies, right? The evolution from LLMs to, just pure LLMs or pure ML to agentic systems, like connecting all of those things across your stack, that inevitably is complex. I think, as you point out, the year of agents of 2025, there is a lot of hype and optimism in the marketplace. There is also a lot of reality checking going on, right? Recent studies showing 95% of AI POCs, in enterprise die because of either poor scoping or like severe limitations that come up. How do you manage that complexity? Like, how do you think about orchestration? What are some frameworks that you've developed that have enabled you to deliver value?
I think that's a good point, and this is probably true for anybody out there who's starting an AI project, which is, what use case are you trying to address? There has been a lot of noise around automation. We have developed our own framework internally that we call the ARC framework. ARC stands for acceleration, replacement, and creation. So what part of the user journey are you focusing on? Acceleration is really traditional automation. That is almost something that you have to do, but there's no opportunity to differentiate yourself. Yeah? It's just mandatory for you to go after this. And as you do so, you should also think about how do you redesign processes and replace certain steps in the process with AI to get even more efficient? Yeah, it's not about taking existing processes and just slapping AI on top of it, which would be counterproductive. So there's something there to gain from, but actually the true gain is focusing on those creation use cases where you identify possibilities and new possibilities that were not able to be accomplished by humans without AI. Those are the high value use cases. And from a business perspective, those are the ones that are going to differentiate you in the future, whether it's better customer experience, faster service that you can deliver, or new offerings that you can build and monetize towards your customers. And those are the ones that you should focus on, those high value use cases, because then the return on of invest discussion around AI becomes a much simpler discussion to have. Yeah. Focusing on those is important, but then you again start small and building out and build out your technology as you learn about the limitations of those technologies as well. I think that's critically important.
And as you define those creation, right, those truly transformative use cases, you mentioned ROI, but how do you think about prioritizing the use cases that your team might bring to you in terms of what's possible? And then how do you get buy-in from other stakeholders within the business to really justify the investments that you might make in a project?
Yeah, that's another challenge, obviously. How do you, what's the rationale behind it? Feasibility, what we usually do as we have identified, let's say, the short list of high value use cases, we typically go into a quick prototype engagement to try to prove or disprove whether this is even possible with today's technology. And based on that and based on the experience that our team has, we stack rank them based on short, mid, and long-term projects. Once we have done that, then we go back to the business and ask for the investment, because then we can more clearly also project the potential upside revenue that we could generate from this, or the competitive market positioning that we can improve, and that becomes the business case around the investment for those activities.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's at the end of the day relatively simple in the sense of like, is there upside revenue, or does it become a differentiator that allows us to win more market share or have, stronger differentiation versus competitors? Can you give us some examples of the use cases that fall into that last bucket, the creative, transformative potential use cases?
So some of the use cases that we are addressing and we have put into the product as well and into the platform are really centered around how do you manage network operations, case creation, and troubleshooting. Before, this was a manual process. A lot of people were involved. Very difficult also to see correlations between different events that are happening in the infrastructure. So it's almost impossible. It is impossible for a human to oversee that. And we're using basically agents to analyze those events and help the user to operate, troubleshoot, and eventually if those systems can't fix the issue by themselves, they automatically can generate trouble tickets with our support team to then more efficiently and effectively address the customer problem together with the customer. And that wasn't really possible before. Yeah. So that's a more complex use case. The simple use cases still also have high value. If you think about it, a company like ours, we have tens of thousands of documents, pages of technical documentation on our website. So sifting through that and finding the needle in the haystack from a user perspective is really difficult. And that was the very first use case that we addressed back then is how do you enable users to access that documentation, not only 7x24, but in a way that you get tailored responses back. That was impossible to do before without GenAI. With GenAI, you have almost an engineer sitting by your side that you can ask any question about anything that we know about our products and the infrastructure, and it will respond immediately, very tailored to your question, reducing time to knowledge, so to speak, by more than 90% usually. Again, something that was not possible before and is a high value use case for our customers, especially as you think about the market conditions that exist today, where staff shortage is present everywhere. People have to do more with less people. It's really difficult to find talent in that space. So it really unlocks new potentials also for our customers to then hire new individuals that haven't been familiar with networking in the first place, but giving them a tool and a teammate by the hand that helps them to get onboarded quickly and also create a lot of consistency between different new team members, then all work similarly and all get ramped up at the same time with the same effectiveness through AI. That is also something that didn't exist before, and again provides a high value use case for our customers.
Yeah, that knowledge management use case, probably the biggest unlock for most enterprises as the starting point in all of this, because as you say, there's so much value that can be delivered on the service side or onboarding.
Just by that. And you need to make sure that obviously all of this requires you to really focus a lot on the accuracy of the solution, because that drives trust and that drives adoption and that makes the entire project effective. And then you can evolve from there. And this is what we have integrated into our platform as well. As we were building out those different capabilities, we knew that customers are going to go onto a journey where as they build and create more trust with the system, they want to do more. They want to do more than just knowledge acquisition. They want to integrate operational data, which we have done. They want to use agents, which we have done. But then you have to put controls also in place that the user knows what's happening. Yeah? So explainability, transparency, governance, and control become critically important as you take your users onto that journey from simple but still high-value use cases to even more use cases that were not possible before. Yeah.
You hit on a trio of magic words there, right? Explainability, transparency, and governance, which comes up a lot on this show because I speak to people that are implementing these solutions at scale, right? How do you approach that in an agentic world where you said yourself, right, these are non-deterministic systems, there is hallucination. Obviously, you can put guardrails around these. You can do RAG to ground them in documents and things like that. But what's your approach to transparency, governance, and explainability generally?
There's a lot to unpack as well. As I mentioned, we were developing that platform one to basically run AI on top of it. And when you build a new platform and you build for AI, the first thing that you have to do is really build for data. So data governance is also going to be important, especially as you combine different data sources, devices, knowledge, content from different places in the enterprise, access to data and governing access to the data, classifying the data, making sure that you have high quality data, monitoring and managing that entire data pipeline for both content and structured data is a base. And then you need to make sure that as agents access that data, that governance and access control is being brought through up to the agentic layer as well. If you don't have that in place, you're going to be in trouble, so to speak. Yeah. And as you look at agents themselves, we manage agent governance in 3 dimensions. Yeah. So as you as a user interact with an agent, the agent will inherit your own access control capabilities as agents access and manipulate data. That is really, really important. So there's no excessive access that an agent can gain as you interact with him or her, depending on how you see your agent's personality. It has the same access control. On top of it, we have 3 dimensions that are important from our point of view. One is the deployment scope. So on which part of your infrastructure can an agent run? The action scope, you want to restrict access for your agent further than what you by yourself are able to do. That's an option as well. And then critically important, the level of agency. Is the agent able to take action autonomously, or do you want a human in the loop? And this is also a configuration option as you engage and start our agents and configure our agents, what you want to do. So deployment scope, action scope, and human in the loop level of autonomy is critically important to even get to that stage where you would consider not to have a human in the loop. You also need to understand what your agents are doing. So what we have done is, because agents go through those different stages of planning, reasoning, and then plan execution, we are exposing those chain of thoughts and the process itself to our user as well. So the user can basically see what the agent is doing, how the agent is reasoning, what the plan is that the agent is going to execute upon. And then also we are tracking what the execution looks like, auditing it, and then make it part of the platform as well. So there's a lot of transparency built into the system so the user can really understand, and then understanding usually leads to a higher level of trust. So agents will take more and more of those activities by themselves if the user is able or willing to grant those privileges to the agent itself.
I love that framework, which starts with that key idea of inheriting the access controls from the user, and then this like simple deployment action, human in the loop governance. Very simple yet powerful when you think about deploying these systems at scale. A lot of the focus right now in the industry is in moving this beyond the pilot stage, right? I would imagine you're probably running many pilots with your customers. You are probably also running many production scale deployments. How do you manage the process from pilot to production? What are some of the typical roadblocks that you see, and where have you seen the most success in getting to full scale deployment?
So going to production deployment is obviously challenging with AI in general. So I would say the main area of focus is analytics and metrics. Yeah. So it really starts in the development phase on how do you measure, for example, the accuracy of your system. How you mentioned it before, we also have a RAG system in place for our knowledge management. How do you ground the system, but also how do you measure accuracy before you even ship a product? So that is one thing. And then post-deployment, how do you measure accuracy in production, which is very difficult, but you can measure accuracy from the perspective that is the user satisfied? What's the user sentiment? You need to analyze user behavior on an ongoing basis. Do you see rephrasals happening all the time? So the user is changing the way on how he asks the system. Is that a problem? So does the system really understand user intent? Is the answer considered to be complete or not? Those kind of metrics are critically important for the base system, and that also applies to agents, which is still emerging on how you actually benchmark and analyze agent performance. Yeah, so I think that's an interesting emerging field. We talked about it before. AI startups being in the space of performance analytics for AI solutions and for agents specifically is probably an interesting business opportunity these days, because I don't think that everybody has figured that out yet. We are using human quantification quite a lot. We are doing interviews with users as they use it in production, getting feedback from them, in addition to all of those technical metrics that we have. But this is definitely an area that is still, I think, evolving in the industry.
Yeah, evaluation is something that does come up quite a bit. I've had a few founders on this show actually that specifically have are going after how do you do evals for these systems at large scale. Some suggesting, it's really all about enabling coordination between all the different groups within a company and the users that might be, have some input on evaluating that system. So how do you kind of open it up to get input from all of the people that should be providing input during evaluation? And then others who also suggest that for probabilistic systems, right, using deterministic evaluation systems and criteria is setting them up to fail. So you have to completely rethink. So you have to completely rethink how you do that. And it is an interesting business opportunity as all of these companies tried to figure this out.
It's really pre-production, so to speak. Yes, you can and you must integrate your internal SMEs, so your internal subject matter experts in the process, because you can't evaluate and qualify the system by yourself as an AI engineering team. It needs to be done by the domain owners, by the business owners. So for example, our service agent that does all of the troubleshooting, case management, case creation, that is validated by our GTAC team, our Global Technical Assistance Center team, because they know exactly how this should work, and it's not about the AI team doing this. But this is only working before it goes out in the wild and then customers are using it. So you need to then, in production, you need to observe, have analytics, have instrumentation in place that you can really understand what's happening out there. And as case creation happens through those service agents automatically, you need to go back and work with the GTAC team, analyzing those and benchmarking those again, and then improving it. And then if things go wrong, you need enough analytics to figure out, okay, what's happening. This is why it's also important to not only expose the reasoning, planning, and execution to users, but you need it also as an analytics and metrics source from production to really figure out how do you improve the system on an ongoing basis. And then how do you do that at scale? Going back to the business opportunity for startups in that space, for sure. There's one.
Yeah, you hinted at it a little bit in some of that answer, but deploying these systems, very complex, evaluating them, very complex. How are you structuring your AI team to do all of these things? And kind of what's your rationale behind the structure that you've put in place?
Yeah, so the structure of the team we started, I think most people started years ago, was more of a centralized organization because there was no expertise out in the organization around AI. Yeah? And I briefly mentioned it before. We started experimenting with generative AI in 2022 in the office of the CTO. And then we saw that, hey, to productize it, we need to scale the incubator into an engineering team. And that's what we did. And that's why I also have those dual roles. So incubation first and then productization at the same time. But to be successful in the long run, you need to then integrate with the different business and domain owners. So you need to bring in subject matter expertise into the organization, which leads me to something that I call the AI mesh. If you are familiar with the data mesh concept from a couple of years ago, on where you push ownership down to the domain owners to ensure that they treat data as a product, proper quality in place. They are responsible for testing it and making sure that the product is viable, discoverable, and so on and so on. I think what we are doing right now is really following that paradigm for AI as well. We have started centrally, and now we are pushing that knowledge down to the domain experts to become more efficient for validation purposes, to identify proper use cases, and also scale AI out to the organization, because ultimately AI is going to be a tool like anything else. So the entire organization should be familiar with it and should also own the outcomes over time. So I think we are pivoting right now from that central approach to a more distributed approach. Yeah.
That's a similar journey that I've seen many people who come on this show talk about, and how it has become very much, whether they call it a hub and spoke model or a mesh model or having a center for excellence that is then supporting all of the different business units. It's always that same fundamental principle, to your point, which is AI, and especially generative and how it's unlocking new use cases, is an inherently kind of democratizing type of technology where the domain experts are using it and have an ability to unlock new use cases and provide feedback on the value. But then you need all of this infrastructure in place to be able to serve those stakeholders. And
Correct.
so it creates
You
this,
still need a
system.
central place. Otherwise, you have the Wild West of use case. And you can't bring them together. I think that is also critically important because everybody in AI talks about data volume. I like to talk about data diversity because if you then bring the different data sets from the different domain owners together into one architecture and one solution, then you can do new things that you were not able to do before. You can provide a very different experience to your customers if you combine your business data with supply chain data, contract data, support data, and the operational data coming from your infrastructure as well. And this requires, let's say, is not a totally centralized infrastructure, but a way of those domains to interact with each other. And that becomes by itself almost a multi-agent system that you can build that is then connecting all of those individual domains together and the data coming from those domains. And that makes it so powerful. Yeah? And that's why that hybrid approach, I think, is the right approach to take for sure.
And as you build out that hybrid approach and kind of you're involving all these stakeholders, you're building the infrastructure, there is a lot of noise out there. How do you make the decision between things that you build internally versus something where you might bring in a vendor? And then how do you evaluate vendors when you do decide to bring them in?
That is also interesting. As you mentioned, there's a lot of noise out there. So in general, the direction that we are taking is that if it's for us internally, like an efficiency play, then you should buy something. Why would you build something? There's nothing that you can differentiate on. Really, if you get into those differentiated use cases that allow you to end up in a different place in the market, so be more competitive, then you need to own the stack more than anything. And this is usually an important decision point, yeah. But having said that, you need to be ready to rebuild on an ongoing base because the industry is moving so fast that what you have built 6 months ago might not be viable anymore. So you also need to be ready and take it into account into your business case that you have to rebuild on a pretty regular basis. And if then your business case shifts, then you have to say, okay, I don't build it by myself. Even it's highly differentiated, I rely on vendors to help me because those vendors will then have the burden to rebuild their stack on an ongoing basis. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard similar differentiations between, when it's back office or like operational efficiency. That's when people are more likely to go to a vendor.
Yeah, you need to buy. Don't build it.
Yeah, because then you're kind of distracting your AI team or anyone that's involved in the organization from the very differentiated product building that you could be doing with AI. And so that's typically what I've seen. As you navigate everything that's going on, what is kind of one of your biggest priorities in terms of growth, and what is something that's keeping you up at night? What is a big concern?
Keeping me up at night, let's start with that, is really that ongoing rebuilding that needs to happen. Yeah, so that there's always something happening in AI. You wake up the next morning, you get a call. Oh, there's a new tech, there's a new model, there's something. How do you incorporate that into your strategy? And you need to be able to put a stake in the ground and then move for a while in a certain direction and ignore that noise, because otherwise you're not building and you're not shipping anything. Yeah? So I think that is important. Biggest opportunity, I think we are still in early days of the agentic technology by itself. And as we now see agents opening up to collaborate with other agents even outside of your organization, talking about new technologies and protocols like MCP, A2A, this is going to change the way on how businesses are going to operate, not only in their own domain, but also across domains, but also between enterprises and companies moving forward. That's the biggest opportunity in my mind that we're going to focus on. So how do you connect what you have built with other systems to create even more value? I think this is the most interesting area. So probably 2026 will be the year of this, or some call it the agentic web, where agents are going to talk to each other across enterprises and cross domains. And what's going to be possible with that technology, I think is, again, we are just scratching the surface at this point in time.
I agree. We're very much scratching the surface. As someone who personally uses a lot of MCP connections with, even what I run locally on my system, that's where I see tremendous value in terms of being able to deliver work in my everyday life. And some of the things that you hear about what an agentic web would really look like and what that could enable is very exciting. In terms of networking specifically, what excites you? Is there anything else that excites you very much about the trajectory that we're seeing?
I think it's going to be interesting in terms of AI in general, on which trajectory we are going to go when we think about artificial general intelligence. So there's a lot of hype around this. That's probably the most overhyped technology. I'm not sure where this is going to go, because ultimately, as I mentioned before, AI to me is a tool. AI doesn't really have emotions or can imagine things by itself. It does a lot of creation. I mean, if you look at the whole vibe coding effort and movement that is happening, there seems to be a lot, but ultimately it's still just a tool. It still cannot think, feel emotions. While it can sense emotion, it doesn't have emotion or morale. So I think people are really overhyping the AGI discussion at this point in time. But there might be something, as usual, falling out of this that is going to be really interesting and surprising to all of us. So I'm really looking forward to that. And that really excites me on what path we're going to take in that area.
Always find it interesting how all of the conversation around AGI or ASI kind of, so many of the people who are talking about that have never studied what intelligence truly is, right? And they obviously also have massive vested interests in proclaiming AGI. And it's hard because I think individual users, when you're using these systems, there are moments where you experience things that feel very much like intelligence, or feel very much like thinking.
Or illusion that, hey, there's somebody on the other side, but it's not. I think people need to come to that realization. But that will take a while. That gets lost in the hype.
It does.
And as you said, there are some people pushing this. They have a vetted interest in pushing that kind of idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that we're wrapping up, so I want to get to a very quick lightning round, which is a little more focused on you personally, rather than how you're doing this within your organization. But what AI tool do you use personally the most?
Personally, I am using ChatGPT the most.
And are there any particular use cases that have unlocked? I've always found when I talk to people about AI, particularly people outside of the industry, there's always almost like a gateway use case that got them hooked, and then they started thinking about other ways that they could use it. Is there one that you particularly like?
I just saw yesterday a LinkedIn post where OpenAI shared the typical use cases on how their users are using it. And it's the same for me. It's really ideation, writing, rewriting things, and use it as a replacement for doing old school Google search. I think it's exactly in those buckets that I use it the most, I would say.
And what's your go-to resource for staying up to date on the industry, which, as you pointed out, changes every day?
So there are a couple of newsletters that I'm subscribed to. There's nothing in particular. I mean, the usual TechCrunch, Stanford HAI is always good. I have a couple of contributors that I follow on Medium. McKinsey is pretty good from like more of a business consulting perspective around AI. I like their sources quite a lot, but I think you have to pick a few and don't get dragged into too many. Otherwise, you get lost again in the noise. Yeah, you can read all day and you don't get any business done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard with all the noise to find the signal. What is a concept or phrase about AI that recently stuck with you?
I have a phrase that I usually use as I end my presentations, which is really, AI is not going to replace you, but another human using AI might. So you want to watch out for that and be close to what's happening in the industry. Use it, adopt it, because if you don't do it, somebody else will do it. Yeah. So I think that is critically important. And as part of this, it's also important that we don't lose our human skills, because they are going to be the ones that are going to differentiate us in the future, which is remain critical, think critically. So don't give everything to AI. Yeah, otherwise you're going to lose that muscle memory for sure, and keep your creativity high, and human skills like collaboration, like what we do, have a conversation. This is something that AI can't really replace. Yeah, so I think that's important. And another concept recently goes back to a presentation at an AI festival that was done by Alvin Grayling. And he talked about the concept of abundance and the new reality that we have. If AI really takes over so many mundane tasks, what is our purpose in life moving forward? And also the availability of resources that go along with it. So it was really a very interesting concept on how our future as a society is going to look like after we have really figured out what we can do with AI. So that definitely did stuck with me as well.
Yeah, I love that concept as a avid sci-fi fan since I was very young, that dealing with that concept of abundance and what a new relationship towards productivity and work might mean to be human is a very interesting one. Markus, that's all we have time for today, but I've really enjoyed the conversation. If people want to follow your work and learn more about what you're doing, where should they go?
On LinkedIn, I post regularly, and from there are linkages to our corporate posts, blog posts as well. So that's probably the best. Finding me on LinkedIn is easy. I don't think there's nobody else so far with the same name, so shouldn't be a challenge. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was Markus Nispel from Extreme Networks. Markus, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben, for having me.